and with this conversation because my life's journey has been about healing and health and navigating what that is and what that isn't, and not just for myself individually, but for people that I've worked with in practice, and the synergistic connections of health and all that it's connected to, and the way that our health mirrors where we are, where we've been, and where we're headed, and the interconnected of our health, or interconnectedness of our health to the food that we grow and the way that we grow it, the soil that it's grown in, the thoughts that we think, the relationships that we surround ourselves with, and so much far further and beyond that. And every year we like to bring in somebody who is connected to the ethos of health and the understanding of how of the interconnectedness of health. And when I was introduced to Dr. Kevin Preston's work, I just knew that he was somebody who we would love to bring into the fold. And so it's a deep honor to be sharing his work, and just like a small glimpse of his story and his ethos with you today, to share about the power of cultivating your inner garden for your health and vitality, and the health and vitality as it's connected to regenerative, organic, biodynamic, natural, ecological, biological farming and gardening. And Dr. Kevin is a progressive Chinese medical doctor. He I will call you an athlete. I know you used to be more of a competitive athlete, but I think you're still pretty active. And he's also he infuses quantum physics and Chinese medicine and thought and biological medicine all into one to really help people find their healing path and to connect on a deeper level with who they are, and who they are becoming, and so much beyond that. So it's an honor to have you in the room with us, Dr. Kevin, and thank you for creating this space, and welcome to this conversation.
Thanks, Natalie. Thank you, Leslie, as well. And thanks to everybody on this call today. I'm excited to chat about all the things that I'm passionate about. And I feel like there's a lot of crossover with farming and soil and people's health in general, because I don't really think any of this is unrelated at all. And in fact, the longer I practice, the more I realize that everything is absolutely connected, both internally and externally. And that we can have a huge influence on that, both internally and externally, maybe even more than what we think. So yeah, grateful to be here. Really appreciate everybody in this community, so we can have some deep chats about some of these things and see if we can unearth some new perspectives, or if I can share some things that are of value that help your health and in your lives, then I'll be satisfied with that too.
Uh, where would you like to start this conversation, Dr. Kevin? I feel like we've hopped on a call, and then we had this, short conversation um, before landing here, and it just feels like that's an important question to ask in this moment for you.
Mm. Yeah, there's a few places. I mean, you mentioned progressive Chinese medicine. That's kind of been my take on traditional Chinese medicine, because I was trained. Well, first I did science, science background, kind of more Western medicine. My mom was a nurse, and grew up on a farm in Alberta. My grandparents were farmers down the road, and so many fond memories. And we had a pretty small operation, but I still chased steers, and my brothers and I would have competitions to see who could run and hop on the backs of some of the late steers in the fall, and see how long we could stay on before falling off or getting bucked off. And teenage boys having fun outside, but we'd be hunting and fishing and just being in the forest. And so I developed a real love and reverence for being outside and being in nature. And we had big gardens, and I worked with a lot of livestock, and I was close to going more the veterinary medicine route actually, because I had a love of animals and was around them all the time. And my neighbor actually growing up, they had a big farm operation of cattle and bison and doing all the farming things. And so I got to be around that a lot. And he was a veterinarian. So I got to assist with surgeries and yeah, pulled a lot of calves in my day and had my hands in and around cows everywhere and holding things and, just listening and watching to all the things that go on a farm. And so, getting stuck in the mud with your rubber boots and leaving your boots behind. And, I'm sure a lot of you can relate. And especially as a kid, sometimes those boots get stuck and there's not much you could do about it. So, yeah, lots of days coming home after being outside from morning till night, but deeply satisfied and dirty and, dirt under the fingernails. And so I think that's part of the progressive part of Chinese medicine is I've loved all the framework of Chinese medicine, but I also wanted to bring in toxicity. And I went on a deep dive after getting done school and learning about toxins and environmental toxins, which also led me to study viruses and bacteria and chemical toxins and everything I could get my hands on because I started realizing all of these things were so related. And of course, then I'm seeing somebody come in with health issues, and it's kind of my curious nature and maybe that practical background of being on the farm. Like, you can't just leave something alone. If the tractor breaks down in the field, you don't just leave it there. I'm like, well, I guess that's that. And you just, carry on to something different. You will find a way. And so I love working with farmers as patients, which I do have a lot of, and where practical solutions need to happen all the time. And I've always been a very results oriented practitioner that leaving something unresolved, maybe I'm stubborn too. I just want to say that I want to find out more. I want to understand more and ask more questions. And if I don't understand, then I'm usually going to turn my attention to learning more about a given scenario. And through that process, then, leads to more research and then studying soil in different ways too, and just paying attention to food from a health point of view, but everything in between. And so I've kind of brought that into the Chinese medicine aspect over the years, and then got into like deep dive toxicity testing as well, where I'm tracking down pathogens and toxins of all kinds, especially in our modern world. There's a lot of that to consider. And then studying food more on that front and finding that sometimes the food people are taking in, thinking they're doing a good job, but asking them more questions of where'd you get that? And wait, what supplements are you taking? And what company is that? And what went into creating those products? And finding sometimes at the end of the day, it was basically just powder and filler that started from really inferior ingredients to begin with and then hyper processed. And so of course they're not having a good outcome, thinking they're doing something well. And so details matter in health and certainly in farming and in food systems. So all of that is fair game with patients that I see and some of the training that I do in courses and things, because I want to share and educate the deeper layer of understanding. And, maybe some of the food sources that people are getting, it takes more energy to digest it and break it down than even what their body is getting. And it might be quite devoid of nutrients that they need, or they're not absorbing it because there's so much going on in the gut. So a lot of layers here, but yeah, it's been a fun journey for me. I started Chinese medicine school 20 years ago and never really looked back. And yeah, all the experiences along the way have taught me a lot. So I'm just, yeah, grateful to share what I can.
That's so awesome, Kevin. So you work with patients individually, and you also work with people collectively. You do a lot of speaking, and you also have your new human event, which is coming up in October, which you can tell us more about later, which I'm really excited to share with people too. But what was the moment that you noticed that there was a connection between soil health and human health?
Definitely, yeah, many moments I would say. I practiced for almost 10 years in the Lower Mainland, Langley area, kind of around Vancouver, for those that are familiar. And so a lot of people living in like urban centers, but also some farmland around, somebody was on here from Abbotsford as well, and definitely more farmland in Abbotsford and some of the Langley area that's now being maybe more turned into cityscapes and things like that. And starting to notice such a disconnect from nature. And, when I'd ask patients, when's the last time you went outside? And they're like, oh yeah, I go outside every day. I'm like, how long though? And what are you doing? And they're like, well, I let my dog out in the backyard to, go pee or whatever in the morning. So I might stand outside for 30 seconds opening the door. I'm like, okay, that's not immersing in nature. And not that we can't be healthy living in an inner environment. We spend time in homes and offices and things. But I started to notice the more questions I would ask, correlations of people not healthy and not thriving, the more time they'd spend indoors in regulated temperature environments, artificially so, and around a lot of, electromagnetic pollution and Wi-Fi and 5G and just all of these other aspects that you wouldn't typically find in an open forest somewhere or by a river. And then you're not populating your flora and your microbiome and, being immersed with trees and pollens and all these things that I started to notice a lot of people that were in an office 9 to 5 and wouldn't go outside through the entire day. And then they'd get home and maybe just be watching TV the entire evening and have very little interaction with the outer environment outside of those sort of more artificial environments, and starting to see their immune systems would be affected, their health and vitality. And one of my patients, I got a chuckle, I say this with love, but one of the patients I said last year, she came from Calgary. I see people from all across Canada and the US, and you could just tell there was a lot of low energy, depression. And, I get asking her about her day, and it turns out she works 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day in her parents' basement, helping them with the home-based business. And she works in a room that doesn't have a window. And the deeper we went in the conversation, the more I was just like, you don't need me. I think you just need to not be in a basement with no room and no fresh air. And you haven't seen the sun hardly at all for the last few years. Like, of course you're not thriving. And I could give you herbs and acupuncture and we can do a bunch of detoxes and let's do that and let's see. But gosh, you need to be outside. You can't spend your entire existence in a basement without a window. Like your body is expressing its unhappiness around that. I don't think there's that much wrong with you. Actually, I think you need to get your office out of the basement ASAP, or at minimum, you need a window and put a plant in there and open a window for some fresh air, and your body's probably going to turn around. Of course you're tired. Of course you have brain fog. Of course your hormones out of whack. Blue screen all day long, computer, no natural light of any kind. That is a recipe for disaster. And so this is a lot of what I'm seeing. And so just kind of tracking how connected are people to nature, and not just the external, but also their inner nature. Because I've also met people that are outside all the time, maybe work in forestry, and they may be deeply unhealthy because there's a disconnect of what's happening inside them. And they might be quite connected externally. So it's not one or the other, but all of these are actually things to look for. If you're gardening all day, but you're holding an immense amount of strain and stress because maybe your relationships are incredibly challenging and you have a lot of pent up anger, the nature is still going to help you. But you still got to address what's going on inside. The tomato plants and the rest are probably trying to help you in the best way they can, but they'll probably, if they could, communicate in a way that you were listening, they'd say, you got to address these other issues to get the full impact of what's available.
So true, Kevin. And it feels like a good introduction and segue into, I think you had a couple slides that you wanted to share with us. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to
Yes.
go into those? It feels like a really perfect moment to do that.
Yeah, we absolutely can. Are you just one second here? I'm gonna pull those up. Well, I think Laura might have sent them to you. I don't know if you guys have them
Yep.
handy. I have them
I
here.
do.
Do you wanna, if you got the controls to share screen, do you want to put them up and then I'll speak about it?
Yeah,
I
for
can.
sure. Leslie, you
I have
got
them
that?
open.
Okay, awesome. So Kevin, what what are some of the um indicators that a person who is, because I think this is a great conversation, you're outside all day and you still feel like shit, right? Like, how is that possible? And so, what are some of the indicators and what can we do to help shift that to feeling nourished from being outside and, with our hands in the soil and doing all the things? Because it doesn't matter. Like, I've even met organic and regenerative farmers who are burnt out, who are tired, who are, like, they're whether their health is falling apart, or they're chronically hurt, or they're chronically tired, or they're just exhausted emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. So there's this big disconnect. So I mean, those are like obvious markers, but like, what are the indicators that we might want to look at things differently, and how can we make that shift?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. There's a few things that come to mind. Um, and one of them, almost like kind of backing up for a second, is an image that came to mind as you were speaking to start off with was my grandfather's hands. And he farmed. That's what he did. And I remember feeding the cows with him and, using the pitchfork, shoveling hay, and I really enjoyed it. And I can smell the straw. I can smell the alfalfa. I can smell the hay. I can smell the diesel and the grease from the tractor and riding with him. But I can see his hands on the steering wheel and on the tools. And he had quite arthritic hands. He had rheumatoid arthritis. And so I know it was really painful for him. But I also, and my dad as well, it's like our hands are such a way that we interact with the world. And for me as well, I use my hands to work with people and do acupuncture and testing. And there's so much available in our hands that I think sometimes we forget because they're so practical. And whether it's farming, gardening, food, handling different things, but to just take a moment, and this is segueing into this question too, to honor and feel the gratitude of what we have in our hands and what we can create with our hands, what we can heal with our hands, and that we all have healing capacity right here, that all of us are healers in our own way. And that a lot of times, if we just bring attention to it, even taking a breath, you might even feel a bit of a tingle because you're focused on it. And whenever I even talk about hands or talk about my hands, they feel like quite electrical. And this is how we interact with our world around us, is so much through our hands. And, a lot of farmers have given a digit or two over to their farming career. I've, friends and people I grew up with that, got tangled up in farming aspects. But there is a lot of power in our hands that maybe we don't always consciously think about. But if we are, it actually activates it and enlivens it more. So just, taking a moment before you go out for the day, or before you put your hands in the dirt, or you're going to fix something, just honoring and feeling so grateful for what you do have, for your hands and what they give us, each of us, because we can produce incredible things. We can feed people, we can heal people, and a lot of it comes through the hands. And I think one of the reasons this comes up is that sometimes there's such a disconnect between what we're feeling inside and what we're doing outside. And I'll just speak on behalf of men, the masculine. Men have higher suicide rates than women by quite a margin. And there's a reason for that. And I've been a part of men's groups. I've been in farming. I've been in oil field, growing up in Alberta. I worked on the rigs. I built log houses. And now I'm in medicine and more kind of spiritual groups and healing groups and everything else. And it's a lot of women quite often. And men often don't share. And I'm not trying to just do a segue on the masculine. It's true for everybody in some capacities. We don't always share, or we don't always even know ourselves how much we're holding. And so that's sometimes where a big disconnects occur, is we could be carrying so much and we maybe lose sight of that. And that's usually when the body will start speaking to us. Maybe you start feeling some fatigue or pain or inflammation, or getting up in the morning starts to become a struggle. You're not sleeping well. It's usually a sign that there's something that needs to be expressed, or something that's being unsaid or unmet within the body. Because our bodies, in my view, the body can't lie. It doesn't lie. It's pure nature. Our systems are pure nature. Nature will always communicate the truth. If your plants don't have enough water, you can tell. If they don't have enough nutrition, you can tell. You may not know what it is, but they will communicate directly. If you're not growing produce in the way that you think, there's something happening there. There's a communication network there that's unspoken. Our bodies are the same. So if we start looking at our bodies more so as a beautiful divine communication network that will always tell you the truth, we get a little bit more curious and we start listening. And so the amount of people that I've seen that are burnt out in any capacity because they're carrying so much, working so hard, farming especially. You know, you might be at it all day. There's not necessarily set hours, like people are working in an office, and no shade to that, but there could be stuff at all hours of the day, all time, and our biological systems still need a lot of support. So sometimes we need more support than what we're getting. And starting to look at those areas, if you're starting to feel that burnout, because in Chinese medicine, we talk about the core essence being housed in the kidneys. And we'll get into that with the slides a little bit too, but the kidneys are also in Chinese medicine the root of fear. And so in our society, fear can be so potent, you know, especially the last bunch of years. And where does that get held? In the kidneys. And so that can start actually affecting your core essence and vitality of the root of your body. And so that's sometimes where fatigue sets in, or when they talk about burning the candle at both ends, in a Chinese medicine viewpoint, you're starting to impact the kidney essence. And to me, that's like your internal savings account. And you know, we got our daily checking account. That's more the spleen and the lungs and some of the other organs, breathing air, digesting food, and we turn it into usable energy. We turn it into vital force. The savings account is deeper. It's the kidneys. And so the amount of people that I've met in our modern culture that burn through their checking accounts every day and then start pulling from their internal savings account, that's where bigger issues happen. And the body can do that for a longer period of time as well. Some of us have a lot of kidney chi, you know, a lot of kidney strength and essence from your ancestors and the way that you live your life. So you can go a while, but you know, at some point I get people in that 20, 30 years, they're like, I've been fine. And now I got all these health issues. And I'll usually say there's no way that you didn't feel anything the last 30 years, nothing, that your body didn't communicate anything, and now suddenly it's screaming at you. There's markers, there's signs, but we have to pay attention. And one of those patterns is people burning their kidney essence. And that's where you see premature aging. That's where you see like things that would normally be in the older population, chronologically speaking, showing up in younger people. They've maybe been burning too much of that deeper energy and not replenishing the body, and like overwork is one of the ways to do that, and being overstressed will weigh on that as well. So I think some of this is almost like a resource question. Where are you being resourced really well in your lives? And where are you being under resourced? And looking at some of these categories of mentally, emotionally, physically, and you know, for some of you spiritually, that may resonate in whatever way, you know, connect. My church is the forest quite often, or the moss, you know, mossy rocks. I feel so connected, you know, to the earth and to my own, you know, my own spirit that drives me as well. And so the resource question is a big one. Sometimes we need to take a little bit of an inventory of where are we being resourced well and where are we under resourced, and then, you know, having a real look at that. And when we start addressing that, that actually starts to bring connection back, and it helps us reconnect with what's true, and the body will usually start responding to that of like, oh, they're listening to me. Okay, I'm really under resourced in this place. Let's bring some resources in. And it's very similar to soil and farming. If there is a lack of nutrient density or a particular mineral, you'll see the impact of that. And when you address it in healthy ways, you'll also see the positive impact of that. And our bodies are the same.
So true. You know, my dad, when I was writing, well, the first book that I ended up publishing, I was about like how to be healthy when you have no time. And so I was including all these different tips about, you know, drinking water and including healthier foods, like just things that people could do that took no time that would improve their health or that they could let go of. My dad said, Natalie, if you really wanted to teach people about being healthy, you teach them about the soil. And that was, I'm not kidding, that was like in 2000, 24 years ago. And here we are having a conversation about the connection of the soil with our health. And 24 years ago, that was like unheard of, right? We were talking about the minerals and the fats and the carbohydrates and the sugars and foods, and now we're talking about the energy and the mineral and the actual physical and connection beyond that small understanding that we had. Yeah, thank you for so eloquently tying it all together for us, Kevin. As you have questions, I want to encourage you to pop them into the chat, because we will have time for questions, a Q&A as we wrap things up, and as we go throughout the conversation with Kevin today. So be sure to do that, because we really want to make this interactive and support you in the best way that we can with where you're at, and just what you're nurturing and nourishing in your life.
Beautiful.
Mm, good question, Jen. So I think let's go through these slides, and then we'll come and we'll go into the questions as they come in when they connect to what we're working on. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. I can swing back around. Just question about the kidneys. That's a great question. So, for all of you looking at the screen right now, the yin organs in Chinese medicine, it's not that they're more important than the yang organs, their counterparts, but in in theory, these are some really important connections to be aware of. So, I mentioned kidneys, they're on the list here already. But one of the distinctions Chinese medicine has is that they didn't view these as separate systems, the mental and the emotional part. And one thing I remember from my first day in Chinese medicine school was my teacher saying, Chinese medicine and Western medicine are quite different. Western medicine views the body as a machine, and Chinese medicine views the body as a garden. And having the background that I did and growing up in a rural setting, that really landed and it made a lot of sense to me. Like, of course, you would need to nourish all of the different elements to have a healthy garden, just like you would for the body. And so, one of the ways to do that and one of the ways to pay attention to it is to understand the emotional counterparts to the really important organ systems. So, I already mentioned kidneys is fear, and there's an associated window of time in the Chinese medicine philosophy. There's a 24-hour body clock, and each of the organ systems have a 2-hour window in that 24-hour cycle where they're the most active. And so we've put the times here. So if you look at the top of the list there, the liver is associated with the emotion of anger more so. And you could look at that as irritability, frustration, stress. Those things impact the liver directly, and they impact it initially. It's one of the first organs to be impacted. The time that the liver is most active and doing its deep work and detoxing is 1 to 3 in the morning. And so for patients that come in and they say, Kevin, I keep waking up at night all the time, I'll ask them what time. And they say, it's 2 o'clock right on the nose, or 2:30 all the time. I get really curious about, you've got a lot of strain in the liver, or as a major filter, which the liver is, maybe it's congested. And if you get a blocked up filter, we all know that can create issues with the healthy function. And so the liver is similar. So we want to make sure that we're nourishing that organ and just being aware that unexpressed anger, for example, or an abundance of stress could actually impact the liver function directly. And some of the clinical expression of that can be things like jaundice, gallbladder issues, high cholesterol on the blood tests, often related to the liver. They don't really teach that publicly. It's like heart and, cholesterol and all of those markers. It's not that they're unimportant, but the liver gets overlooked. It's that the liver is often not converting and transforming toxicity, cholesterol included, because we need cholesterol. We need it as a building block. And so these pathways are really important. The other expression can be that you start having a short fuse, that you start becoming quite impatient, or little things that normally wouldn't bother you, they really start bothering you. That's usually a liver thing going on. And I have couples that come in and, maybe one will say about the other, they're just so grouchy and irritable. It doesn't matter what I do, I can't do anything right. And I'm like, hang on, let's do some testing and see what's going on with the liver. And inevitably the liver's usually inflamed or congested. And as soon as we get that sorted, I hear the other side of it. They're like, Kevin, thank you. My spouse is like so easygoing and not stressed anymore. And Oh, that's really helpful. And, just a side note for those of you that are very practical like me, dandelion roots has been pretty well known for being a pretty good detoxifier of the liver. Milk thistle is another one. And again, this isn't meant to be, direct medical advice. You got to do your homework on that too. But these are things I've seen to be pretty helpful. Dandelion root tea. And, it can help move some of that emotion as well. So you can move the emotion by working on the organ, and you can also help the organ by working on the emotion. And so just keep that in mind as we go through these. And then, look at the lungs. Grief is the associated emotion, sadness, and that's 3 to 5 in the morning. So if there's a lot of blockage there, a lot of unexpressed material, you might start having lung issues. And I've seen this with people with asthma or recurrent bronchitis, or they keep getting pneumonia. They may have some lung stuff that needs to be sorted at an organ level, but quite often there's a lot of repressed or unmet grief that they've never taken the time to feel, that they've never allowed time for themselves to process or get support with, and they'll hold it inside. You better believe that's going to affect the organ system. And so I've treated people with pneumonia or recurrent bronchitis and lung issues by actually addressing the emotional counterpart, and their lungs start to heal and they stop getting infections recurrently in their lungs, and they would have never known. And this is the fascinating thing about the practical aspects. These things have real world implications. And so we move on to the spleen. The spleen's a funny one. That's what builds chi, like it builds vital force in our bodies. So we take in air, we take in oxygen, we take in nutrients, goes through the GI system, gets broken down. The spleen then takes both of those components and turns it into usable vital force daily. So the spleen is more of the daily checking account. It's building all the time. Overthinking is the associated emotion. It's not an emotion necessarily, but the translated Chinese medicine saying is excessive contemplation. That's a really politically correct way to say that, of busy brain and overthinking. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest issues in our modern society now, because there's such a high level of stimulus. We're on our technology, we're on phones, we're on devices a lot. And so the spleen is actually being quite taxed. And then even when you're not on devices, your mind starts going, or it might continue going. And there's use in that. We need our brains, we need our intellect, but I find when we can take a bit of a break and give the mind a rest, however possible, often in nature, and consciously move into the heart space a bit more, the spleen will like that. And the spleen will thank you so it can live to fight another day and build more energy for you. So something to keep in mind. That's 9 to 11 a.m. in the morning. So for people that maybe are struggling to get going in the morning, could be, spleen's not producing enough energy, and, there's lots of things to look at there. And then we get to the heart. The heart's interesting because the emotion associated is joy from a Chinese medicine point of view, which I remember being in school thinking, what's wrong with that? That sounds pretty good. But the idea with all of these is the suppressed nature of the emotion is the issue. None of the emotions are an issue. We need anger. We need grief, we need sadness, fear. All of these things are normal, but it's the way that we work with them, or the way that we don't work with them, it's an issue. If it gets suppressed, that is a problem. That's what creates blockage in the system. And Chinese medicine is all about harmony and smooth flow of energy through the body. And so when things get stuck, that's an issue. So joy unexpressed, that can actually back up in your system. Or one of my teachers gave me an example and said, it's like overjoy, where somebody is like too excited, or where everything you say is funny and they laugh at everything all the time, even harmful events or trauma, and they just laugh. And kind of almost maybe in more of a manic type state, that would be a disturbance of the heart. And they talk about the heart in Chinese medicine is the shen, the spirit, and that is housed in the heart. So this area kind of wraps all the other ones together. It's kind of unique. And then we get onto the kidneys, which I mentioned, and the fear being associated, and that's in the evening, 5 to 7. The way that can show up is adrenal fatigue, adrenal burnout, low back pain, chronic low back pain, soreness, or sometimes if you're touching your skin or somebody's working on you, like a massage therapist, be like, oh, your back is cold right here. That's often because the kidneys are stuck and they're not having energy flowing or blood circulation flowing in the way that they should. And it's often because you're in adrenal fatigue or burnout, or the kidneys are holding so much fear that they're literally in like a functional freeze state. And that can actually affect the filtering of blood because the kidneys are filtering blood 24/7. And we need that. We need those toxins coming out of the blood and then passed on to the bladder and out of the system. So just paying attention to even like skin temperature over where some of these organs are. So for the kidneys is the mid-low back. And the idea with Chinese medicine is that the kidneys are the domain of the lower back and anything below the waist. So I've seen this with more of the feminine, the women, uterus, ovary issues, reproductive tissue issues that can relate to the kidneys quite a bit and have a lot of fear there. And for men, that can actually directly affect like the bladder, prostate, these types of things. And when I look at it, another segue, the amount of prostate issues in men in the population is far more than it used to. And toxicity is a big issue with that. But also, if you look at it collectively, a lot of fear in the kidneys can shut down the circulation through the reproductive tissue, and that can lead to erectile issues and all kinds of things. So these are not like one-off isolated elements. These are very multi-layered connected pieces to the body. But I think if you guys have this structure and you kind of understand the time segments of when these organs are active, some of the symptoms that you might see as a result of that, then you can start to be curious about tracking down what your body needs. And so maybe I'll just take a pause, see if Natalie wants to chime in on that. I can go back to the question about the kidneys and more.
No, so good, so good. One of the other things that I really wanted to acknowledge you for and thank you for is presencing the vulnerability of the masculine, and because I think that is a big missed conversation in today's space. And it's a conversation that Leslie and I have a lot, and I am very fired up about. And so I honor the masculine and also the integration of the marriage and the support of the feminine and the masculine coming together in a way that just loves each other and holds each other and honors each other in a way that we can both rise together. So thank you for that, Kevin. And I'm curious about your insights around all those organs that we looked at, and the connection between the masculine and the feminine, or if you have any insights about that as well, and what shows up more in those ways.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Can almost, feel a bit of emotion around this because we've been brought into a society that is quite polarized, and there can be a lot of battle of the wills and all kinds of ways, and within ourselves too. I think we all have masculine and feminine energy naturally within our system, and maybe have a predisposition towards one being more dominant, but it's not really about that. It's more about the energy and how can we work together, because when we talk about fertility and having fertile soil, we need all those elements, and we need structure and function. And those can be looked at as masculine and feminine. And it is the beautiful communication and the connection or the communion of those that allows us to create not just life, but life in the form of plants and projects or movements on the planet to become healthier, citizens, and create a healthier culture. It is somehow finding the dynamic balance between the masculine and the feminine, and that they can be so powerfully mutually supportive of one another. And I'm at this stage in my life too that I've got really beautiful people that I get to work with, and we help support each other, and like really amazing feminine presence, and they can offer me perspective and wisdom that maybe I'm missing or I don't see, and I can offer that back to them as well. And then everything is better like when we're coming at it from that like curious, open, and co-creative space. And so this is reflected in nature all the time. And in Chinese medicine, it's all about balance. And if we have an imbalance, that'll usually lead to some kind of issue, with the body. And so the traditional sense of that would be yin and yang. And yang would be more masculine, yin would be more feminine. The sun is more yang in nature, more masculine. The moon is more yin. Both have huge impacts on growing. and both have huge impact on cycles of time and nature and electromagnetics on the planet. And so I see that happen within our bodies, and often wondered when people would say, "Oh, the moon affects people a lot." And I thought, "Ah, does it though?" And then you get thinking about the moon controlling the tides and the gravitational pull, and our bodies are, 75, 80%, maybe even more water in various phases. Of course, it would be impacted. And our bodies are like a walking electromagnetic battery, and so are plants. And so are trees. They conduct electricity and they change electron change. And so one of the reasons I like communing with big trees, not only do they have really grounded roots that can help my energy ground, but it'll actually, and there's research on this too, it actually affects the electron chain of the body. And in Chinese medicine, that's where issues come up, is where the energy starts flowing backwards and stops flowing in accordance with the natural cycle. And a lot of reasons can create that, challenging conversations, physical trauma, emotional trauma, poor nutrition, not getting clean water. The active electromagnetic pulse of the body starts being impacted. So when I go and find a giant tree in a big forest, I feel like magnetically pulled over there, and so grateful for these, beautiful beings that, I'll tie this into maybe one of the questions here too, that there's a connection there. There's a connection both for us and a connection with nature. And that is, I think, what helps bring balance back to our systems of the yin and the yang, because we need healthy balance with all the yin organs that I just spoke about. And the yang organs in the body are kind of more of a dynamic force, like the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine. They're quite active, and they help move material in the body. They help shuffle it along. And then the yin organs have like a deeper receptivity to pull those nutrients into the places that are needed and to carry out even deeper functions in the system. And so if there's balance between those organ networks, there's balance and harmony in the body. And then if you have balance and harmony in the body, you'll usually find your relationships become more harmonious. And the things that you direct your creative energy to, they work better and they work easier, because our plants, they feel us, they feel energy in a big way. And so, hopefully that answers that question a little bit, or that direction. And then I can speak more to one of the comments in the chat here too.
Yeah, it does for sure. And I just wanted to echo the piece about the trees. In a talk I just did a week or so ago, there was a psychiatrist in the audience, and he stood up afterwards and he said, I work with people who are coming in with like massive depression and anxiety and all the things. And he said, we're actually prescribing force bathing to them now, because it's showing to be more effective than the medications that we're using. And I'm not a doctor, and I'm not telling you to go do that. It was a curious and very inspiring feedback from somebody who is medically trained as a psychiatrist who's integrating nature into its practices. So thanks for
Mm.
presencing that,
Yeah,
Kevin.
yeah, beautiful. I love that more practitioners are coming to this realization, and people finding they just feel better. And so there's a beautiful question here, comment. Is there a sense, in Chinese medicine, of soil having consciousness or intelligence? And this person, Katrina, looks like in New Zealand, and the Maori people have a deity of the soil. And I'm not going to maybe try and pronounce that, Hein, maybe Ahu one. Sorry for butchering that. But yeah, the maiden of the soil. That is so beautiful. Thanks, Katrina. And yeah, so in communicating with nature, I think, we just touched on it a little bit already, but this is, I think, what has led to a lot of disconnect, is that people have stopped listening to the natural world around them, the animals, the plants, the sentient beings, the creatures, the insects, all of it, the soil too. And that I believe there's a really deep wisdom in all of that nature, and that sometimes we forget that we are nature too. And that there is so much unspoken connection and communication happens. And, some of my curiosity, the birds, for example, when they migrate, how do they know when they should go? Because it's not like they get an app with a reminder, hey, it's time to migrate today. Here's your email. They're tapped into a greater consciousness. They're tapped into a greater electromagnetic field of awareness and information. And we actually have access to that too. I think it's just been forgotten and it's not something that's being taught. But in certain schools, especially telepathy, or go off the beaten path here for a minute, they're finding a lot of kids nowadays being born have really powerful aspects of telepathy, and they can be blindfolded. And some of you have probably seen some of this online now in clips, circulating a little bit more of kids being blindfolded and being able to name colors and shapes and things like that without visually seeing it. They can feel it. So I do believe that soil, trees, plants, like all of this aspect of being on the earth here, there's massive consciousness within that. And a lot of the ancient cultures knew that too. They were very connected. So I feel like there's a bit of a renaissance right now of, a lot of us that are having these types of conversations. We're interested in that. We want to remember, we want to bring that back because we're finding there's such a beautiful union, and that is beneficial to us personally in our health and vitality and farming and gardening or whatever we're trying to create or produce, that is completely in alignment with the flow of regeneration, where things are getting healthier over time if we're paying attention and listening. And I have clients that are really gifted and that talk to plants and can feel them really clearly and exactly what they need. And that can be cultivated over time. And I have other friends that are more animal communicators and that have this sort of nonverbal, beautiful, energetic or telepathic type connection with what's going on, and things get confirmed that you can't make it up, because I'm a skeptic at the heart of my heart too, but I'm also open. And I love having practical solutions, but I love learning about all the things that I don't even know about yet. And so I love that question and comment, and hopefully that was helpful in some way. And that, yeah, as we come back into connection and deeper connection, it only benefits us to do that, and it benefits the people around us. And speaking as a parent is similar. I've got teenagers and they're beautiful and amazing. And if I'm paying attention, I'm really listening to them, not just their words, but listening deeper of what do they really need from me at each kind of stage of their growth and development. The way that I can meet them is completely different. And I'm not perfect. I learn parenting is something I'm passionate about too. And my son beautifully said to me maybe 3 weeks ago, he said, Dad, and my kids go back and forth. Their mom and I are together. And he said, Dad, I really appreciate that when I'm at your house, you always know what I need. You always give me what I need, and you let me do what I need to do. And he's 14, and he is conscious, aware, and aware enough to know that I'm doing that consciously, and he's able to speak to it. And when he's tired, I let him rest and I encourage it. And when he needs support in a different way, I do that. And when he needs some, more firm boundaries and that more firm guided love from me, then I can hold that too. And it changes, but I'm doing my best to pay attention to that rather than just operating at well, this is what I was taught, this is what we need to do. And so bringing that openness and curiosity into all the places in our lives, and especially right now, of how to produce really great produce or food or farming or feed or whatever it might be, whatever you're creating, that we need to slow down a little bit and pay attention, because there's so much information available if we're willing to listen. And thanks for listening to my rant about that.
Oh, yeah, I deeply appreciate that. I mean, I think there's a lot of parents in the room. I'm a parent. I deeply empathize with for that. And yes, Leslie says beautiful. Thank you. And Kevin, I'm so curious about um, how you see soil really connecting with the health of the human body and the health of consciousness, moving like where we are today and moving forward, and how we can have, and maybe I'll lead with how we can have these types of conversations beyond a space like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Maybe I'll weave some of these pieces together, because there was an earlier question, what supports the kidneys?
Mm-hmm.
And the savings account that you mentioned. And I think that does connect to the soil, because it's such a deep rooted organ, and that all the things I mentioned about being the essence, that I feel similar about the soil. You know, if we want to plant a seed, you got to nourish the soil. And so that was actually some of the Chinese medicine work I've done with fertility. I've worked with a lot of fertility cases over the years. And so this is where I think there's such parallels that sometimes they, you know, I'd have different couples coming in, or aspects of the coupleship, and they weren't having success getting pregnant. You know, they had tried and tried and tried without success, or maybe they'd get pregnant, but they would miscarry. And so to me, that meant there's an issue with the soil of the body, and that either is a mineral deficiency or an energetic deficiency, or something wasn't creating healthy soil to grow something, you know, or to plant the seed. And or maybe it would start growing and then not move through to maturity or completion. And so this is where I would start asking deeper questions about some of the fears or stresses, or, you know, different issues that somebody was facing that was actually affecting their physiological reproductive health directly. And so when I think about the soil and the beautiful parallels of that, if land or soil is under stress because it's been overworked, it's going to be impacted. If our bodies, same thing. And so some of these come back to like physiological needs of nutrition, but there's multiple sources of nutrition. And maybe a quick story to illustrate this, and you'll tie it into the kidneys. I had years ago, I had a patient who is a nephrologist, like a kidney specialist, worked at the hospital, trying to get pregnant, not successful, had miscarriages, and had done either 2 or 3 rounds of IVF at that point without success. And because she was a kidney specialist, she did her own process. She did her own ultrasounds. She did her own ovarian reserves and eggs and retrieval and all of it. She was involved in all of it because that's her expertise. She did that for others. And she could not understand why it didn't work. And I started talking to her about her life, and she was working 12 to 15-hour days when she was on staff because they were short. There wasn't enough nephrologists. She's a specialist in high demand. So I discovered she was in burnout. She was incredibly stressed, under a huge amount of pressure. And so I asked her, like, do you really think that's a conducive environment to support life in your body? Your body's in fight or flight mode. You're so stressed. As soon as that happens, nature will put reproducing to a secondary position because survival is primary. And so you see this with deer population or animals in the wilds. If there's not enough food to go around, they may not reproduce that season. Nobody told them. That's naturally intelligence if they understand resources. And when there's abundant resource, maybe that deer has triplets the next season. So I walked her through that conversation, which was kind of a complete paradigm shift for her. We did some acupuncture, pretty simple treatments. I got her to take some time off, and we processed a lot of what she was carrying. And she came back, I'm not making this up, she came back after 3 visits with me over a month, and she was pregnant. And she couldn't believe it. And she carried full term. And I saw her years later at the grocery store with her toddler, and she said, "Kevin, you may not remember me, but like, this is my kid. That is from you. And thank you again." And it was, you know, deeply impactful for me as well. But I also thought it's so simple. We addressed the places that needed to be addressed. And so I feel like that connection with soil is also going to address the kidneys directly, and it's often slowing down and giving yourself a chance to rest. And some of you might be like, "Kevin, if you knew my life, where can I do that?" But this is the big shift that we're in. These are questions I ask myself too. I've been so busy the last few years. Luckily, I know how to resource myself. I can take herbal medicine to get by, but I've also seen in my own patterning overwork, defining my worth by how much I produce. Growing up on a farm, working on the rigs, working in construction, and especially as a masculine, only speak for me, I completely related my worth to how hard I could work and how many hours I could work. which is pretty hard on the body over a long period of time, and looking at where do we source our value and our own vision of who we are as people. And when we can start to soften that, that will center that's housed in the kidneys can start to soften as well, where we're maybe not as hard on ourselves, our own self-judgment, our own ideas about who we have to be or what we have to do. The kidneys will feel that. So one of the ways to nourish your kidneys is by not being so hard on yourself, to give yourselves more grace. And then the kidneys can actually physically soften and relax with how much they've been holding. And when they soften and relax, they will filter more efficiently. They will allow blood flow to move through the lower body, and they'll start to nourish those areas. And so maybe anybody here that knows somebody with fertility issues physically, to really allow the kidneys to be softened and relaxed, and to hold the kidneys with reverence, and to take a hot bath once in a while, put some Epsom salt in there, or get some treatment with some hands-on, where somebody can actually put their hands on your back. Or even if you're not a practitioner, get your spouse or somebody you love and trust, and just say, hey, can you put your hands on my back today? I'm exhausted. My kidneys are exhausted. Kevin told me to nourish my kidneys. And so just allowing your hands, and you can put your own hands, I've taught this with other groups too. You can put your own hands on your kidneys, on your back, and, just let the kidneys be held a little bit and let them be nourished. And then when you're thinking of taking, food in, certainly maybe it goes without saying, I'll just say it, it's really simple maybe for lots of us, that you need really healthy food that's been grown properly for the body to be able to absorb that. And in Chinese medicine, and it's becoming more well known too in other forms of medicine, in Chinese medicine though, it was you need to eat what you're deficient in. And so some of my teachers would say, if you have liver issues, eat liver. If you have kidney issues, eat kidneys. If you have heart issues, eat heart. And so certainly this is obviously from strictly from an animal-based diet if you're going to use that, but there's other plants that can be used as well. There's other herbal formulas that can be supportive, and walnuts, for example, are really good for the brain, and they kind of look like the brain. And so there is this notion in Chinese medicine that you can eat foods that are the color or look like the body counterpart of what you need. And it's really fascinating to start looking at food that way, of what does this relate to. And so beets, dark red, purplish, good for the blood, really good for the liver. And they kind of look like the plant version of the liver when you cut a beet open. For anybody that's hunted or had livestock, the liver's pretty dark color. And beets are pretty close to that. And they're really good for the liver, very good for circulation, really rich in minerals, iron, copper, these things that we need. And so if you're kind of paying attention to the food and what that supports in the body, then, that might, send you on your way of taking things into your system that you need. And this is, I think, why some of the supplements on the market, freeze-dried organ extracts, that people are finding they feel better with them, because they're usually getting pretty depleted internally, and our society as a whole is experiencing that. So, little capsules and freeze-dried liver, it's becoming more popular, grass-fed organs and things where maybe there's heart, liver, and kidneys in there. I think people are naturally, wanting that or being connected to it, or notice when they take it, oh yeah, my body feels differently. It's like, yeah, it's because those organs are depleted. So there's a lot of ways to, bring that back in, but at the heart of all of it is actually soil. That if the soil is nutrient dense in the livestock that you're feeding, from a food point of view, or you're taking it from the soil directly, that is massive. And this is one of the reasons I said yes to, coming on and connecting. And Natalie's amazing and lovely as well. A lot of resonance here. But this might be one of the most important things on the planet right now from a health point of view. And something that I'm wanting to learn more about, because the soil is literally the ground of all of it. And that is why we're seeing, I think, so many health issues in the population, is that foundation is not being met. through their own lack of education, lack of knowledge, part of, society. And so all of us educating ourselves of how do we create that healthy foundation if we're going to grow anything, if we're going to creatively be fertile beings to create things in the world to make it better, then of course the soil is the key. Oh, you're just on mute, Natalie. Yeah.
In so many ways. In so many ways. I remember doing my training in polarity therapy, which is based on Ayurvedic, Chinese medicine, and some other different modalities. And one of the parts was we learned the energetic connections of the different foods and the different elements like the air, fire, water, and earth. And I always was so curious when I learned that food was energy, um, how far and beyond the sustenance, like I was talking about earlier, right? Like the sugar and the carbohydrates and the fats that they gave to us, like energetically, they're actually feeding us. Like they're feeding us. Like if we are energy and the way and we are planting our seeds and we are growing those plants, then energetically that imprint is going throughout the entire ethos, and it 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 just makes me pause. I don't even have words for it, but I can feel the stories that you're sharing and the resonance that they have is communicating that energy of the food's life and of the ethos. So I just wanted to thank you for that, Kevin.
Hmm.
Yeah. And Jen had just had a follow-up question about the kidneys, if we could just touch on that, because she
Sure.
said her most energetic time during the day is from 5 to 7, but dragging much of the rest of the day. Does that mean her kidneys are doing well?
Yeah, the kidneys could be doing well, and it's possible that she's also sourcing energy from the kidneys. And so really we'd want to look at, if somebody's doing well during that time, awesome. Then it'd be curious to look at the other places where that energy is not flowing or the vitality is not quite there in the way that it should be. Some of the other organ systems would likely need to be nourished so that they can also support the kidneys, but support the totality of the rest of the body.
Mhm.
And looking at ways to like either offload toxins, for example, can be a big one, and making space. So there's a couple things maybe I'll just speak to on that is if we want to have really good absorption and taking in really beautiful nutrition, really beautiful foods, if there's a blockage in between, we may not be able to absorb it properly. And so that is a huge issue that I'm seeing. The uptake, somebody might come in and say, I'm having all these issues. I eat better and cleaner than anybody I know. I eat my own garden, like all of these things. Why am I still struggling? And it's usually because there's like former toxicity, other exposures that they've had, maybe even a long ways in the past, that are affecting their gut, affecting their absorption, and blocking some of the pathways to actually be able to receive something new. And
Mhm.
so ideas are the same. If our ideas are completely formulated and we're not open and we're closed in the mind, somebody could present you really beautiful intellectual data and information, but somebody might not be able to actually take it in. They can't hear it, won't consider it. They already know. No, I know that this is the way. And so having an open mind and having a body that is receptive to receive the nutrients in all the different forms, energetically and food and otherwise, sometimes we got to clear some space. So this is where detoxing our minds and our bodies actually, it can really help if we're
Mhm.
trying to bring in something new. And so,
Mhm.
I mentioned the liver and the kidneys, and lymphatics is not one of the organ systems in Chinese medicine that's named, but I work a lot on lymphatic systems for people. Acupuncture can be helpful for that. Lymphatic massage can be helpful. Craniosacral, there's a lot of things. Sauna, I'm a huge sauna fan. Having a big sweat. I'm still getting in the cold from time to time as well, and it really works the vessels. That's one of the beautiful aspects. Like it helps pump the lymph through the body to help you unload and detox. And so sometimes if somebody's having a trouble or difficulty receiving, then we got to look towards what's maybe in the way of that. What do we need to clear out? And I've been in a big purge the last 6, 8 months, tossing out stuff I don't need, clearing out the storage units and all these things. I'm like, why do I have all this stuff? Because I could feel that I was carrying too much intellectually and just clutter in my mind, clutter in my body. And as I clear my body, then I need to clear my environment too. And this is maybe, springtime, our energy naturally comes up from a Chinese medicine point of view as well. Same thing. It naturally starts coming up and out of the deeper places. So in the winter, our energy goes deep, just like soil and trees. All the sap is not in the tree, it's in the ground. And in the springtime, it starts drawing it back up again. So if you think your body's in the same way, this time of year is a good place for contemplation, for being in your cave, for cocooning, for sleeping and resting more, for being okay sitting in the dark, and really looking at what are the deeper aspects of my life and being more contemplative and preparing yourself for springtime. The season before is one of the best times to do that. So even with allergies in Chinese medicine, springtime allergies for some, pollens and all that kind of stuff, you get into late spring and early summer, the best time to actually heal that is wintertime, to work on the deep energy, because your energy is deep. So that's why it's really good to eat root vegetables and things that are deep in the ground. And often, garlic and beets and potatoes and carrots and things that they're grown in the dirt. They're not above it. And so that can be deeply nourishing. And, even other things. I'm a big fan of medicinal mushrooms, reishi, shiitake, cordyceps, shaga mushroom, grows wild in BC here too. Deeply nourishing for the immune system. And so through the winter is a beautiful time to take that in. And what I have found in working with patients, and that if they come in when their allergies are full scale, then we're just doing more kind of triage, and creating information. And we can get good results doing that too. But if you can get to somebody the season before, that's like that secret magic, that secret availability to set yourself up in springtime really well. So all these things we're talking about, if you can kind of land and nourish your body as well, and take that rest during this time of year and go to bed when it's dark out if you can, your body's going to be happier and being in that rhythm of cultivating. And then as the light returns in springtime after the equinox, you'll have more energy. But we got to take the rest cycles when they're available.
Just on that note, you talked about people, doing all the right things, eating all the right things, and they're still having problems because their bodies, turned off to being able to receive it. And some of what we're learning is that there's this generational thing that's actually happening with the impact of, we'll say, glyphosate, for example, right? So first generation, not so much. And then as the offspring, the grandchildren and grandchildren is where the toxicity from the glyphosate is showing up. And I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not giving advice. And so we want everyone to do their own research here. And but what can we do to help our body be more receptive to receiving that nutrition if that blockage is happening and we're doing all the right things?
Some of that, I would say, in the way that I do it in the clinic, is I do toxicity testing, which gives me a bit of an advantage there. And there's ways to do that. And so hair testing is something that more people are looking at, and different blood tests that can test for like mycotoxins and things that you might inhale, or if you've lived in an environment that has been moldy or something like that, which many people have, especially in BC. There's a lot of mold here, especially on the coastal regions where it's warmer. And so looking at maybe, sitting down and just considering, what have I been exposed to that I know of, or what potentials was I exposed to? And then, seeking out practitioners like myself, or many others that do more functional medicine type testing. It might be a good idea to do a hair panel for heavy metals, because you're not going to be able to absorb minerals and nutrients that you need in the same way if you've got a heavy metal capacity that's like outsourcing that. It can block your ability to absorb. It can create inflammation, change the pH of your body. So heavy metals is something to consider. Mycotoxins, again, like mold testing and things, is something you can do blood work for and more readily available. Yes, some of these you got to pay for, but it can be worth it. There's different labs in Germany. There's different labs that, if you're working with a naturopath or, if people want recommendations, I'm happy to, share more as well. I have my own programs that I do as well called the Vitality Collective, where we do work on detox because I've seen that it's such a big issue and that you might be doing really good things, but if there's old residue or toxins that you're still housing, we got to get that stuff cleared out so you can kind of reach your full, healing capacity, your full potential. So those are a couple things off the top of my head that can often be looked at, or, for some doing a lymphatic detox or lymphatic remedies. We have, beautiful Nature's Fair in Vernon here. And there's ways to do it naturally. I mean, you can look up cleanses and things like that of how to do a liver cleanse just with food, or how to help your lymph kind of cleanse, and maybe you incorporate some fasting. I did not quite 4 days, a water fast. Started on New Year's Day and didn't eat anything, just had water and fresh lemon juice and salt. That was it for, not quite 4 days in it. It worked really well. I didn't have any issues that I was trying to solve, but I wanted to see how I'd feel. What if I just went super minimal and allowed my body to clear out anything that is not serving it anymore so that I could better receive when I did start, I started juicing a little bit with really fresh organic food, and then got into more food, and I appreciated my food more, I could tell you that. And my body did as well, and it was able to absorb. So there's a variety of ways that can be effective, but yeah, fasting is one of them. Juice cleanses, liver cleanses, lymphatics, and to kind of feel into it and trust your intuition, trust your knowing of which pathways, or maybe all of them at different sequences, and allowing the body to actually kind of offload some baggage. The other side of that would be counseling, therapy, somatic therapy, and working with somebody that can help the mentally emotional aspect, because that definitely affects the physiological function, maybe even more. The physical body is usually the last thing to manifest symptoms. They generally start on the mental and the emotional side first. And if they go unaddressed for a long enough period, they will become physical. So sometimes we got to go up the chain of events to kind of get ahead of some of these things that keep landing in the physical body. You can treat it physically, but not only that. So look after the body, but look after the mind.
Mhm.
And, go ahead, Natalie. Yeah.
I was just going to say it's kind of taking us in a little bit of direction, but I was just wondering, like, what percentage of the health problems that we're having today are directly related to the chemicals and the poisons that we are using to produce the food that we're eating, both the food that we're growing and the processed foods?
That might be hard for me to put a percentage on, but maybe I'll say it this way. Like, every person that I do toxicity testing with is housing some level of toxicity related directly to chemical toxicity. And, I've seen this in my own family system. My dad worked at a gas plant as well. Like, we had our little farm set up, but he also worked at a gas plant. And the amount of chemicals I've helped, love you, Dad, and he's still around. And I think I probably helped him out quite a bit. We did a lot of clearing and detoxing because he grew up farming. He grew up using chemicals, no masks, no gloves. We didn't know back then the harmful nature. And I grew up also being in the shop with him, getting grease on my hands and using paint thinner or gasoline to wash it off because it works really well as a solvent. Turns out it's got benzenes and lead and tons of toxicity, but we didn't know. But would that absorb into my body? Yes, it would. Can my body manage and deal with that? It can, to a point, as long as we're mindful about it, or I work on my organs. But for my dad, after 30 years in a gas plant, the amount of chemical toxicity that he was exposed to was massive. And so then we got to work doing a lot of detox to help offload that stack. Because when somebody's cup gets full, that's usually where we start to see a big problem. So you're talking about, like, generationally, a lot of kids being born over the last 20, 30 years are already starting with a cup that might be quite full from previous generations of exposure. And early on, chemical exposures, especially from a farming point of view, is a big deal. And growing up in Alberta, a lot of my patients, farmers in Saskatchewan, Some of them have the most amount of chemical toxicity I've ever seen. And I'll say, let me guess, you're the sprayer, aren't you? And they're like, yeah. And we got a great cabin filter and we've got all these amazing things. I'm like, yeah, but what about the last 30 years? Not so much. And
Mhm.
where does it blow and become aerosolized? And we bring it in, and certainly glyphosate as well is a big one in the water systems and everything else. So a lot of you may know Dr. Zach Bush. I'm a big fan of Zach. We got to work together at my new human event in October, and his product Ion is meant to help repair the gut lining and the gut wall so that glyphosate doesn't have the same impact. And yes, it's hard to get in Canada, pretty much got to smuggle these things in at this point, but there's products available that can cultivate this. There's Chinese herbs that can cultivate this. There's working with practitioners that can help get you into a better state. So it's very widespread and kind of unavoidable. But I've also noticed if we have a healthy mineral base and nutrient base in our system, you won't take on the same toxicity from the environment. It's like iodine. If you have enough iodine in your body naturally, you won't take on unhealthy sources of iodine from your environment. So you kind of have to fill your cup, empty it, then fill it, and that's going to go a long way.
Mhm. And so can you just take a little bit deeper on this and what your take is on the connection between the microbial connection between soil, mind, and body?
Yes. So I do work with a lot of kids as well. I've worked with a lot of what is now being termed neurodivergence, neurodevelopmental delays and things. Some know it as autism spectrum, ADHD, OCD, the whole thing. Every single patient I've seen where there's something going on neurologically has a gut disturbance and has a microbiome disturbance going on in a variety of ways. And so we do work on that to clear bacteria, maybe parasites, chemical toxins to restore the integrity of the gut, because that connection between the gut and the brain is massive. So if the digestion's inflamed, the microbiome's out of balance, the nervous system will be as well. So a lot of times conventional thought is like, well, you got to treat them at the brain level. We got to alter their chemistry. And the chemistry of the brain is the after effect of the chemistry and the microbiome in the gut and in the body. And so putting the gut first is what needs to happen. And then when we do that, we see tremendous results. And neurologically, they shift. Their behavior shifts, their brain fog, their ability to focus or sit still or take in learning, or even becoming, from nonverbal to being able to speak. I have seen that by restoring proper function of the gut and the biome of the body. And a lot of that's often through clearing metals, clearing toxins, clearing anything that's in there that's not supportive of the body, that then the repair starts happening and you see the nervous system start to become more regulated, and parents will come in and say, Kevin, they started talking. How'd you do that? And I'm like, I didn't do anything directly for their brain necessarily at that point, but I worked on the gut and I worked on that inner environment and bringing it back into more of a state of harmony. And suddenly everything starts shifting. And to see that over and over again, it tells you the power of the system. If you just build some inner environment that is conducive to healthy function, it'll happen. The body knows how to do it. It just needs the resources and time to put it together.
Mhm. So is including foods that are grown without the use of chemicals something that is more and more a part of your practice?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I look at this on a supplemental level too, and things that I give out. I'm really picky about what I use because I don't want to add to anybody's chemical toxicity, and often that's an issue already. Their gut already has disturbance. So I tell people the things I want them to eat, and actually even what's more important is what they eat is where they're eating it from. And because there's so many different diets right now that there's a lot of confusion of what's best, this diet or this diet. And people ask me that all the time, and before I tell them what diet they should do, if I even do it all, I'll say where you get your food from is maybe even more important than what you're doing. If it's more plant-based or more carnivore or somewhere in between keto, you can eat all meat all day long on the carnivore diet, and maybe somebody else is having success with that. But if you're getting unhealthy sources that are full of steroids and chemicals and high fructose GMO, corn feed and all the rest sprayed with a horrendous amount of chemicals, doesn't matter. Their body's going to be inflamed and they're going to try and pull some nutrients from that, but they're going to have to put so much inner vitality towards clearing toxins that'll be exhausting after a while. And same with plants. If you're taking in plants that are full of chemical residue, your body just, your energy has to clean that up. So a lot of your vital force is going towards cleanup rather than building muscle and proteins.
Mhm. So true. And Kevin, can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I'm just noticing we're already at the top of the 90 minutes. Um, this is a question actually from my dad. He says, I trust in the intelligence of nature. Are you aware of Robert Sapolsky's work, Thoughts on Free Will? And he asks, is every cell all-knowing? Like,
Great
thoughts about
question.
that?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Roberts, and I made a note. Thanks for coming back to that. But I believe our cells are all knowing. So anything going on with any cells in the body, the rest of the cells are completely aware of it. And so I don't view the body as compartmentalized, maybe like kind of the opposite of Western medicine, where, if you have an appendix issue or a gallbladder issue and they say, oh, we can just take that organ out, that might solve an acute problem. I can recognize that. I have respect for that too. You don't want that, taking you down with getting an inner infection. But the question I have is like, why did that organ system have an issue in the first place? It's not an isolated part that is not connected to the rest of the body. So the rest of the body will have been aware of that, pathology or that disturbance going on, and it will have been trying to remedy it. So anything going on within this network is one system, and it will absolutely be impacted, either positively or negative, depending on what's happening in the body. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I saw there's a couple other ones here too, just quickly on the
Yeah,
trees
thank you.
is great point. I love what's shared there by Mark. Trees will off gas, plants will off gas. And I've been wondering about that with forest fires in BC, because we've had a lot of fires here the last 7-8 years, that it puts a lot of stress on the plants and the trees as well. And a lot of people last year, after brutal forest fires the year before, massive allergies, and a
Mhm.
lot of people that had never had allergies before. And part of my curiosity was the offloading and the type of pollen and the stress of the offloading on all the flora, the trees, everything was quite inflammatory to people, because the trees were having an inflammatory response and doing what they needed to do to rebalance their ecosystem and to protect themselves against, forest fire and that communication network. So we do need to be mindful of what's around us. Doesn't mean our bodies can't remedy that in some way. And this is where I'd be working on people's lymphatic system, because we also took on a lot of smoke too, not just the trees. And this is where it'd be helpful to do some detox of the lymph and the liver and the organs to help decrease the load of the different toxins that would build up through that process, both possibly from trees and from the smoke at the same time. So, yeah, great point. That's yeah, really key.
Mhm.
I think I covered the rest of these. Yeah,
Yep.
nature, compost trays in the basement for the office worker. That's, yeah, bare feet on the soil. I did tell her you got to get outside and put your feet on the earth or bring some dirt in. So I love that, from Katrina there too. And anything we can do counts. A little bit of plants, a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of dirt can go a long way. And yeah, I'm just really, grateful to have beautiful interaction with all of you here today too.
Mhm. Well, Mr. Dr. Kevin Preston, thank you, thank you, thank you for your heart, your insights, for sharing your stories and your wisdom and your life experiences with us so we can deepen into just the connection of all that is, all that isn't, and knowing and trusting that we're exactly where we need to be in this moment for what we're expanding into next on the horizon. So thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for hosting me and creating this space to come into. And thanks everybody for listening to all the stuff that wanted to show up here today. And yeah, so grateful, to be connecting in this way and being in touch with farmers. And thank you for everything that all of you are doing, helping. I don't farm myself, I'm too busy, but I'm working on healing. And so I really appreciate all the healthy food and organic nature of stuff that I sustain my body with to deep gratitude for that. So yeah, thank you everybody.
Yeah, and you can tune into Dr. Kevin at on Spotify at the New Human Experience, and you can find him online at drkevinpreston.com and newhumanevents.com. My dad went to his New Human event and absolutely loved it. It's actually the first event that my dad went to like that, and he's had opportunities all his life to do something like that, and it was he really really enjoyed it, Kevin, and couldn't say enough great things about it. So thank you for hosting that and providing a beautiful space for people to heal and connect. And you can also find him on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Dr. Kevin Preston. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, big love. And thank you to each and every one of you for carving out the space, for doing the work that you do, for having your hands in the soil and your feet on the ground and your hearts wide open to learn together and to grow together in this community, within yourselves and within your relationships that you're stewarding. We deeply appreciate you and we value you and we love you. So thank you. Thank you for being here.
Wow, what a beautiful time together. Thank you so much, Dr. Kevin. Wow. So my request is that you go and tell everybody you know. I mean, we need to share this information. So this particular session resonated very deeply with me in my personal life. So I want to share it with everybody I know, and I want you to share it with everybody you know. So, Dr. Kevin has a handout. We saw just one of the two slides. That will be with his session information when you log into the course. And that's just what a beautiful theme, the woven theme of rhythm and reverence and health and vitality. And we're going to be continuing this theme with Stuart Lundy at the top of the hour
Yes.
and reviving your soil with biodynamic compost. Very much in this theme though, so it is all interconnected. So what a beautiful time in the room with each of you. We have a couple prizes I will announce and invite you all to be back on this same Zoom link in 20 minutes for Stuart Lundy. So we have a celestial planting calendar to give away, and that it is a planting guide with easy to follow charts. And it is also based on the rhythm and power of nature. And so Fiona Gold is our winner.
Yay, Fiona.
So it's a physical product, Fiona. So we will need to connect by email so that we can send it to you. Okay. And we have another physical product. High Mowing Organic Seeds is gifting us with a pound of cover crops, pound of cover crop seeds to give away each session. Oh, golly gee, hold on, I lost it. I have, Lori Bruce. Is Lori Bruce in the room? So Lori Bruce is the winner of the cover crop seeds, and I will connect with Lori by email. Okay, so I will put this in the chat as well. You know, and these speakers, these wonderful speakers, we don't share your information with them. So it's up to you. You have, it's up to you to reach out to establish the relationship with these speakers. So the ones that resonate with you, please, you know, follow their work. Maybe send them an email of what you thought of the session. If you're on social media, like them and follow them, and how can you support them? And also, many of the speakers have given us discounts. So when their work resonates with you, look for the discount section on the free watch page and on the paid all access page, you know, and support these wonderful human beings.
Right.
That's
And
great.
yeah, thanks for that, Leslie. Are you going to announce Dr. Kevin's discount that he gave?
Yeah, so I have
I
put
definitely
it in
forgot
the
to.
chat. He has given us, I think, 15% off. 15% off the interstellar tickets for his conference in October that he's already really intentionally working on and planning and preparing so that it can be a wonderful event for you. Okay, so that's a 15%. Do you see that in the chat? If you scroll
Yep.
through, you'll see
Yep,
it.
we do.
Okay,
Yep,
good.
I just forgot to mention it, so I wanted to.
Okay, yeah, it's been in the chat a few times. If people are
Mhm.
looking at the chat, you'll see it. So grateful